What makes a normal person turn into a cold-blooded killer? Serial killers have captivated the world, not just for their brutality, but for the chilling mystery behind their minds. From real-life horrors to Hollywood obsession, discover the dark truths behind the most infamous serial killers in history. 1. A serial killer's motive can be categorized into 4 reasons. When a serial killer kills, there's usually an underlying motive. Of course, no one just murders someone without getting something out of it. According to research, serial killers have 4 motives. First, those who kill to fulfill a mission. These are those who want to rid the world of prostitutes or those curing societal ill. Second, those who are hedonistic. Killers who just find pleasure from killing. Third, visionary murderers. These are killers who feel like they are called by the devil or God to do the deed. And lastly, the control-hungry killers. 2. The 24 serial killer murders of Ted Bundy. In January of 2019, Netflix released a documentary about Ted Bundy. He was a serial killer in the 1970s, and the documentary Conversations with a Killer, the Ted Bundy tapes, gives the viewers a glimpse of the crimes he committed. Research reveals that he's killed at least 36 women, but up to this day, there is still no confirmation for that number. Bundy's killing ground was within Washington, Colorado, Florida, and Utah. With all the trial proceedings, he was finally convicted of murder and was sentenced to death via an electric chair. The execution of the infamous killer was on January 24, 1989. This is just the beginning of all these chilling serial killer facts. 3. Jeffrey Dahmer was a victim-eating serial killer. Easily one of the most famous serial killers of all time is Jeffrey Dahmer. No one dares to forget how he lures his victims from public locations to his apartment. Dahmer would put them in chains, drug them, and strangle the life out of them. Right after that, he would eat some of their body parts and the remains were left in his apartment. Dahmer did this in the 1970s until the 1990s in the Milwaukee area. On July 22, 1991, he got arrested because one of his victims got away from a possible murder. Finally, in February 1992, Dahmer was sentenced to a total of 15 life terms. This was after pleading guilty to all 17 killings. He did not live to spend all these years in prison, as he died in 1994 due to prison beatings. 4. A peach orchard gave away serial killer Juan Corona. Juan Corona was from Yuba City, California. One would not suspect him as a serial killer, as he lives a normal life in the city as a farm labor contractor. However, on May 26, 1974, Corona got arrested because of the bodies found in an orchard. Neighbors near that orchard reported to the police that there was some kind of suspicious activity in the area. All evidence led to Juan, and he was finally convicted in 1973. His final sentence was life conviction without the possibility of parole. He never admitted the crime but was seen as guilty by the court. In a 2011 hearing, Corona finally admitted to the crime of stabbing all 24 workers to death while shooting the 25th victim. According to him, his victims were alcoholic trespassers on the orchard. 5. A police officer turned serial killer. Joseph James DeAngelo was a police officer before he did a series of rapes, killings, and assaults in the 1970s until the early 1980s. To date, he has a total of 13 confirmed victims. He moved from one country to the next without being apprehended for the crimes that he committed. On April 24, 2018, DeAngelo was arrested and he pleaded guilty to 13 counts of special circumstances and murders. Detectives of the case traced back all evidence to him because of a public genealogy website, as well as the DNA samples from his car and trash. Since he pleaded guilty, he will not be facing the death penalty. However, 11 life sentences would not give him any kind of light for parole as well. All these serial killer facts just prove that truth will surface no matter how long it takes. 6. A crawlspace convicted a party clown serial killer. John Wayne Gacy was a construction company owner. But he also did side jobs as a party clown for children, as this is where he gets to abduct young boys and men. Gacy lured them to his house, and it was where he performs his killing fantasies. On December 21, 1978, Gacy was arrested because the remains of his victim were found in his house's crawl space. After 16 years, he was convicted of 33 counts of murder, was sentenced to the death penalty via lethal injection. His execution took place on May 10, 1994. 7. The Grim Sleeper Serial Killer. Somewhere between the 1980s to the 2000s, Looney David Franklin Jr. was out targeting drug addicts and prostitutes in downtown Los Angeles. He had his nickname Grim Sleeper because authorities believe that he stopped all the murders for at least a decade before doing another murder spree in the early 2000s. Franklin was married with 2 children, and he was a former garage attendant and a city sanitation worker. But nothing lasts forever, as he was arrested by the police on July 7, 2010, after his DNA was matched to a series of killings. Because of all 10 victims, he got a death sentence in 2016, but he died last year in prison. 8. Samuel Little was a traveling serial killer. Studies say that there's a slim chance that serial killers would switch from one area to another to have their kills. But Samuel Little is another story. He's a nomadic serial killer from the 1970s until 2005. After he left Ohio in the 1950s, he traveled around the U.S. committing crimes. Some of his killing locations were Arkansas, Georgia, Arizona, Florida, Mississippi, South Carolina, Texas, Maryland, Kentucky, Tennessee, and Louisiana. In an interview with the FBI, he admitted to over 93 murders, but he was only convicted with 8. Little's targets were often vulnerable women who were drug addicts and prostitutes. He would punch them first, stun them, and then strangle them to death. Since there were no stab marks or bullet wounds to his victims, most of the kills he did were said to just be drug overdoses or accidents. Little pleaded guilty and was given a life sentence first before getting an additional 4 life sentences. But he did not get to see those years pass by, as he died in 2020 while serving his sentence. 9. One serial killer kept a journal of his murders. Randy Stephen Kraft murdered most of his victims in Michigan, California, and Oregon from the 1970s until the 1980s. His targets were young hitchhikers with military backgrounds. On May 14, 1983, he was arrested by the California Highway Patrol when they found a dead body in his passenger seat. Plus, they also found a notebook in his briefcase containing all his killings. The notebook also had details for all the murders of at least 60 people. During his trial, he was convicted of at least 16 murder counts and was sentenced to the death penalty. Kraft is currently at the San Quentin State Prison awaiting his execution date. 10. The Night Stalker Serial Killer. One of the most interesting things in this list of serial killer facts is that there are also murderers linked to Satanism. Richard Ramirez had a fascination with Satanism, and this led him to do horrible things in his lifetime. During the 1980s in California, he stalked unlocked doors and windows at night in the neighborhood. He looked for women victims, but he shot men that he encountered while looking for his main targets. Most of his victims ranged from 9 to 83 years old. On August 31, 1985, he was captured by a mob of Los Angeles citizens before he got arrested by the police. Ramirez was convicted for at least 13 murders, but another killing in San Francisco gave him a spot on death row. In 2013, he died due to cancer at the San Quentin State Prison while waiting for his execution. 11. A churchgoer could also be a serial killer. Dennis Rader was also called BTK Killer. BTK stands for bind, torture, kill. With at least 10 victims in the 1970s to the 1990s at Kansas, Rader was low on the radar as suspicious. He was a husband, father of 2 children, a Club Scout leader, and he was also a devout churchgoer. Rader was a compliance supervisor in Kansas, and this is where his first killings began. According to records, his co-workers were his first victims. Right after that, Rader also killed his co-worker's husband and children. Unlike other killers that hide in the dark, Rader leaves crumbs for the police to find. He sent cryptic letters to the police and media all those years of his murders. Rader eventually got arrested after one of the floppy disks he sent was traced to his church. The killer's DNA gave away his freedom and he pleaded guilty with 10 consecutive counts of life terms. He's currently at Kansas El Dorado Correctional Facility serving his time. 12. A serial killer got a 200-year sentence for murdering prostitutes. During the 1990s in New York, Joel Rifkin is out and about strangling and killing prostitutes. Rifkin's an unemployed landscaper living with his mom in Long Island. His tactic was to pick up prostitutes on the street and then he'd strangle them while taking their thing. On June 28, 1993, his car was pulled over by the police and they found a dead woman in the trunk. Rifkin went on trial and confessed to the murder of 17 women. However, his attorneys came to the rescue and justified that he was suffering from a mental illness. Nevertheless, he has 200 years of sentence in prison and currently at New York's Clinton Correctional Facility for his incarceration. 13. The Green River Serial Killer. Washington State's Green River Killer is also one of the infamous serial killers of all time. Gary Leon Ridgway lurked in the 1980s to 1990s to target prostitutes and runaways. He was given that nickname because he leaves his victims' bodies at the Green River banks right after killing them. His arrest happened on November 30, 2001, after his DNA matched the killings from years ago. In the trial, he pleaded guilty and confessed to murdering 48 victims, and in 2011, a fourth slaying was charged as well. He's currently at the Washington State Penitentiary serving his time for a life sentence. 14. A serial killer targeted drug users. Chester Dwayne Turner was married and had 4 kids while he was on a killing spree for drug users. His location centered on the south of Los Angeles between the 1980s and the 1990s. Turner was already in prison for rape when police charged him with the murder of 10 women. Before he was charged, David Allen Jones, a janitor who was mentally challenged, was put into prison for 9 years for a crime that Turner committed. Thankfully, they found out the truth after Turner's DNA samples matched that of the samples from the crime scene forensics. In 2017, he was sentenced to the death penalty for the slaying of 10 women, and an additional of 4 murders were added in 2014. Turner is currently at the San Quentin State Prison serving his time and waiting for the day of his execution. 15. When a sex offender and a serial killer combined into one. Do you know how some people abuse those who are helpless and could not do anything? That's how Anthony Sowell took advantage of his victims. In the state of Ohio in the year 2000s, he preyed on women victims that were homeless or struggling with abusive drugs. Sowell would invite these women to his house, offer them food and beer, and kill them eventually. According to his statements, he had the urge to kill these kinds of victims because they reminded him of his ex-girlfriend who did him wrong. All his victims were strangled and then buried inside his property. On October 31, 2009, he got arrested for sexual assault, and after a house sweep, several bodies were found inside his property. Because of this, he got the death penalty via lethal injection. But in 2021, he already died in prison. 16. There's a serial killer who was once in the Army. Robert Lee Yates was a former pilot for the National Guards and the Army. But one secret he kept close was that he had a thirst for killing prostitutes. He was doing it in the areas of Washington State from the 1970s until the 1990s. On April 18, 2000, Yates got arrested after a prostitute's blood sample matched the blood found in Yates' car. Thanks to DNA and the advanced technology of science, he was easily linked to 12 other murders. During his trial, he pleaded guilty in the hopes of getting a life sentence instead of the death penalty. But up to this day, he's still on death row at the Washington State Penitentiary awaiting his execution. 17. There could also be a female serial killer. It might sound odd to others, but yes, not all serial killers are men. There are women, too. Aileen Wuornos had a history of prostitution, drug abuse, and robbery. She started killing men who picked her up for sex in the interstate of Florida between 1989 to 1999. According to her, she only killed them because of self-defense. Wuornos claimed to have been repeatedly raped and beaten by these men. Richard Mallory, her first victim, was a sex offender. On January 9, 1991, she got arrested after her lover reported all the murders to the police in exchange for her freedom. Her lawyers tried to bail her out on the grounds of having borderline personality disorder, but she was still found guilty by the jury. On October 9, 2020, her execution took place after saying that if she got released, she would still find a way to kill again. Creepy stuff in these serial killer facts, right? 18. There is no distinct pattern for serial killer profiles. Movies and social bias descriptions would often portray killers as middle-aged sadistic white men who have sexual motives. While some serial killer profiles fit this image is often misinterpreted. If one would take a closer look, the serial killers, as well as their victims, come from a variety of backgrounds and age groups. This just shows that anyone could be a serial killer. You will come across at least 36 serial killers in your lifetime. They will have a wide range of reasons and motives, and some might be suffering from mental issues. These are the usual perpetrators who get caught easily because they do not act rationally compared to those who are deemed normal in society. 19. Serial killer Ed Gein skinned the body of his victims. Edward Theodore Gein, or Ed Gein, had the nickname, the Butcher of Plainfield. He's an infamous serial killer who's known for skinning the bodies of his victims. Because of this, his story became the inspiration of many films and books like the novel, Psycho. Police found the gutted and headless body of a missionary woman in Gaines' farmhouse in November 1957. Along with it, authorities also discovered human skulls and suits made from skin and parts of the human body. He told police that he dug all of these bodies to remember his mother. Since he was found to be mentally unfit, he was sent to Wisconsin in a mental state hospital. The judge found him guilty of insanity, so he spent his days in the hospital instead of a prison cell. Gein died on July 26, 1984 due to cancer complications. 20. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre was inspired by a real serial killer. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre is an American slasher film in 1974. The main protagonist of the story was Leatherface, a person/creature who skins people alive and tortures his victims to death. The inspiration for Leatherface's character was the serial killer, Ed Gein. Although the film was initially marketed as based on true events, the plot was fictional altogether. It's interesting to know that these serial killer facts are somehow linked to films and novels. 21. Serial killer drove around the city with bumper stickers saying he kills. One would think that serial killers would do everything they could to stay away from police radar. But that's where we got it all wrong. Not all serial killers worry about that. Pee Wee Gaskins was one of them. According to reports, he was one of South Carolina's prolific serial killers. Gaskins even drove around the city with a bumper sticker on his hearse that said he's hauling dead bodies in his truck. When people pass him by, he just said that he needed to take all the bodies of his victims to the cemetery for him to bury. When he was on trial, he claimed to have murdered around 100 to 110 people. 22. Fat people are not on this serial killer's list. Dorangel Vargas is known as the People Eater, or El Comedian. He's a serial killer in Venezuela, and he's also known as the Andes Hannibal Lecter. Vargas ate and killed at least 10 people in his lifetime. But he had a specific preference when it comes to eating the meat of a person. He did not eat the flesh of a woman, he only eats men. According to him, a guy's meat tasted so much better than that of a woman. Also, he avoided eating fat people because, according to him, they contained too much cholesterol and could be harmful to him. Well, these serial killer facts show that even murderers have their own definition of class. 23. Doctors could be serial killers, too. In modern history, Dr. Harold Shipman is known to be one of the world's most prolific serial killers. He's a British doctor, and according to sources, he killed over 250 innocent victims. Shipman preyed on his patients and murdered them to his liking. His youngest victim was a man in his 40s, while the oldest is a 93-year-old patient. He never got to face the full scale of his trial because Shipman hung himself in the year 2004, a day before he's supposed to turn 58. 24. Serial killer movies are popular. One of the most interesting serial killer facts is that society is very much interested in topics like this. This is the reason why serial killer movies and documentaries are available at our discretion. Aside from the new Netflix series and documentaries, say 7 is a movie for those who are into creepy thrillers. The serial murderer in the movie kills his victims according to the known 7 deadly sins: pride, envy, lust, sloth, anger, gluttony, and greed. 25. Most serial killers begin their killing fascination through animal torture. Studies reveal that most convicted serial killers started their killing fascination after doing animal torture. Before moving to human murders, they somehow started by experimenting with smaller animals. According to records, most killers confess to having some sort of pleasure and fulfillment after killing these defenseless creatures. Since most killers come from dysfunctional families, abnormal and pathological behaviors like these often get ignored. 26. There's a serial killer who just got married so she can kill. Belle Gunnes was an immigrant from Norway in 1881. She came to America and settled in Chicago, where she also married a fellow immigrant. However, her husband mysteriously died. His death gave her several insurance policies which she used to purchase a farm. She got married the second time, but her husband met an untimely death, too. After this, she began placing advertisements in newspapers for suitable partners to come and visit her on her farm. And guess what? Those suitors made their way to her place and never came back. A fire devastated Gunnes' house, which led to the discovery of several buried bodies on the farm. 27. This serial killer had a murder castle. H. Holmes was an insurance scammer turned pharmacist in the late 1980s. In his Illinois property, he built a 3-story murder castle filled with murder chambers. Most of the rooms have soundproof paddings with peepholes, trapdoors, and gas lines. During and before the World's Fair, he would lead young men to his place where he would gas them. Holmes then took his victims' unconscious bodies to the torture chamber where he started experimenting on them. He was convicted for only 4 murders, but he admitted to killing at least 27 people. This is one of those creepy serial killer facts to date. 28. Not all serial killers are men. There's a common myth that labels men as the only people capable of murder. This does not come as a surprise because a former FBI profiler said in a report that female killers are non-existent. Right after this, stereotyping has been around ever since. But this is where we got it all wrong. Through the years, we have seen female serial killers appear. Numbers can't lie. And it just shows that the thirst for killing does not choose a specific gender. 29. The infamous pig farmer serial killer. Who would forget Robert Pickton, a serial killer from Canada? In 2007, he got convicted for the murders after his arrest in 2002. Reports show that Pickton put all his poor victims' bodies in the same processor where he'd put his pigs in for ground pork making. This led police officers to believe that the townspeople who got meat from him were also unknowingly consuming and eating human remains. 30. A serial killer couple killed their kids. Fred and Rosemary West were English killers on trial for the murder and torture of 9 women. These gruesome killings happened from 1973 up until 1987. What's worse than all of this is that they were also accused of killing their child, Charmaine. She was only 8 years old at that time in 1971. It does not end there. The duo would even tell their remaining children to behave and be good, or else they'd end up with the same fate as the other child.